Hey everyone, it's Katie from Moonflower Moments. Thank y'all for joining me today. I thought today we would do a top 10 tarot decks from my collection kind of video. So for the past 2.5 years, I've done a really good job of checking in with my collection because I really do try to use everything that I own. And so about 2 times a year, I will go through this crazy frenzy and pull out all of my decks, put them on my kitchen table, put them on my coffee table, and order them from favorite to decks I haven't bonded with yet. And that's the way I kind of like to think about decks that are at the bottom of my deck list. They're good decks. I bought them for a reason, but I still need to kind of build that relationship with them. And so what I decided to do for this go round is I went ahead and off camera, I picked the 10 decks that I think would rank in my top 10 spots. So I thought I would share those with y'all today, and I'm actually going to start with 10 and I'm going to work my way up all the way to 1. And as I go through the decks, I'll share with you the reasons that these decks are working for me right now. They could be on my list next year, they could not be on my list next year, yada yada yada, we'll just see. So the deck that I'm ranking number 10 is one that I've used so much this summer, and that is going to be the beautiful, gorgeous Slavic Legends. So my husband bought this deck for me for Christmas. It was a complete surprise. He has Slavic heritage on his mother's side, and so he wanted to bring in that sort of energy into my collection. But I'm just so pickled to death that he knew that these bright, oversaturated colors would be something that I really work well with. I like to use this deck in my Empress practice. So when I've been engaging with Empress energy in my garden, I like to pull a card like this one, and I will see how incredibly detailed this artwork is and look for something that's just as incredibly detailed in my yard or in my garden. So I've been having a lot of fun with this deck and the way that it's been helping me to be more mindful of my environment around me and to just notice the beauty around me. So Slavic Legends is going to be number 10 for all of the reasons that I just listed. Illusori is another one. This is a deck that gets a little bit more airtime on my channel than I probably read with it, but I'll explain why. This deck has such an incredibly specific purpose in my practice that when I think of it, I always think of it as one of my favorite decks, but it's a deck that I deliberately use for a very specific thing. And so I don't want to just use it willy-nilly. I tried to use this deck reading for a friend one time, and I literally felt it in my bones screaming at me stop, please don't do that. So it kind of has a loud mouth. I consider this to be my Knight of Wands deck, and I talked about that in my Decks for Court series for the Wands. But to get to the main point, this was the first deck that I purchased when I bought my house. And so my house is this cute little A-frame that was built in the 70s, and her name is Cheryl, and she's a 70s gal. And I know that this artwork isn't necessarily 70s, but my house is really weird. It's an unconventional A-frame. It has a spiral staircase. It does its own thing, and this deck definitely also does its own thing. So I know that it's not for everyone, but in the way that it asserts its identity, it reminds me of my house a lot. So anytime that I want to check in with my beautiful house, which is usually probably about once every 6 months, and say, hey, you doing good? Termite season is right around the corner. Are you fortified? Are you prepared? Is the termite barrier working? Of course, I'm still going to call the exterminator and up that termite barrier, but I like to read for my house in that way. So that's one of the things that I do that's very specific to my practice with this deck, which makes it number 9. It would be higher, but like I said, she doesn't want to read for anything and anybody. She reads basically for Cheryl, and that's basically it. So if that wasn't too much of an overshare, Illusori is my deck at number 9. I love this deck, so I'm happy to share it with y'all, even though it is out of print. Next, which would be number 8, is going to be my Herbcrafter's Tarot. I cannot wait for school to start again so I can pick up my daily practice with this deck once more. I usually pull about 1 card per day in the morning before school, and I try to read the guidebook, and they have these zesty little messages that just they kind of are earworms. They just stick in my ear all day. So I really like the way the guidebook, the messages are short enough but potent enough to where I can reflect on them even if my day is like super busy. So I am gonna go ahead and say that this is number 8. But had you asked me during the school year, I probably would have said like 5. So this is one that can kind of plus or minus 3, depending on the season of the year. I think I'll pick it up more during the school year again, but it's a very treasured deck in my collection. I think there's a reason so many people talk about it on TarotTube. All right, now another one that kind of flip-flops a little bit, but is always in top 10, and that's going to be my Mystical Dreams Tarot. Mystical Dream, Mystical Dreamer. I think it's Mystical Dreams. I'll put it in the description box below. So this card in particular hits pretty heavy for me, so it's so interesting that it's on the top. I live in a place that's really prone to flooding, of course, because I live in Louisiana, so I can't help but see that this is water that's trying to like come up to the castle. So I definitely see this card and like I feel defensive of my home and defensive of my property. So this is like the most effective 7 of Wands for me ever. But the reason that this is consistently on my top 10 is because the artwork is so dang weird. But it was one of the first tarot decks that I bought. Maybe it was like number 6 or number 7, I can't remember. And so this was the deck that really pushed me outside of traditional RWS imagery and really encouraged me to get to the basis of what all of these cards mean for me. So some of the ways that I read tarot that are incredibly ridiculously unique to me are because I was trying to find a way to make sense of RWS like keywords with a deck that like is not very RWS based at all. And so I have like some really blended ways of seeing things. So like, for example, this one right here, 5 of Wands. Normally when you think of like 5 of Wands, you have like competition, you have peer groups that are fighting, yada, yada, yada. This is a card that I look at and I kind of read it from more of a numerological, blah, blah, blah perspective. And I think of 5 as, of course, being like a turning point. So this person is teaching this young person how to fish. So they are passing along that skill so that they can retire and this new person can finish out the rest of the fool's journey within this suit. So it's a little bit weird, but like it definitely has like that career thing that goes on with the wands. I don't know. It's interesting. Does anyone else have a deck that is just a little bit off the beaten path, and so therefore the way that the cards are depicted impacted the way you pretty much read every other deck? I don't know. It's one of my formative ones. I love this deck too because of the way that it gives me a gut punch. I used to do deck interviews with my decks when I first got them, and one of the questions I would ask would be like, what is our work together? And for this deck, the answer to that question was like 5 of Cups and 10 of Swords and Tower. So this is not a deck that I go to for simple things, but it is a deck that I go to when I'm feeling deeply, deeply emotionally wounded and I need a deck that will tell me the truth. And so Mystical Dreams is going to be a part of my top 10. And let me double check. It was number 7. All right, next we're going to have what I call Corte Ana. Here's the name of the deck right here if you need it. So I love this deck an incredible, incredible amount. This was one of my Christmas presents for my husband this year. This is the one that I knew about. And he also snuck Slavic Legends in because he loves me, is what I would say. So I love Corte Ana because there is no guidebook to this. There's no directions on how this is supposed to be written. Some of like the pips are done in like a Marseille style, but then you have this right here, which is not Marseille. I don't know, man. I come to this and I really just feel my intuitive powers soar because since there's no prescriptive meanings to any of this or even really any way you're supposed to read it, I get a lot from this because I don't feel boxed in by traditional meanings. So this is one that I use not only for myself, but I use for other people. And like, say for example, with this one, this is seven of Wands. So I might focus here on like an RWS version of the 7 Wands, maybe like you're holding your ground, hence like this wand going in the middle and like the pressure kind of being at the bottom to hold your ground and stand your ground. I might also see it from like a Marseille perspective of a 7 where you're experiencing a breakthrough. I don't know, it really just depends on the context. And so I don't read this deck in isolation. I use it paired with other decks, especially Somnia. It loves to be read with Somnia. And so for that reason, I feel like I'm able to kind of read it intuitively because I'm not just using it by itself, but I'm using it paired with other things. So that definitely influences the way that I read the cards as well. And I love the cardstock. I believe that this is hand cut, so it's like an ultra thick deck. It's very hard to shuffle, but there's something about having like a deck this big and kind of difficult to manage that makes me feel like a real tarot reader from ancient times. So we're on to number 5 now. We're getting close to the top of the list. I have to pull Greenwitch for this one. This was another deck that I got on really early in my tarot journey that massively impacted the way that I read tarot. I love this village. This is a hug deck for me. This is a comfort deck for me. This is a guidance counselor for me. I go to this deck when I need a smile. It's definitely a good moods deck for me. Seeing all of these people go about like their daily lives, and it really does feel like a village. It feels like a home. So I primarily use this deck when I need just that little boost. You know, I come to it and I'm usually probably already in a good mood, but then I pull a card and I get like Ace of Cups, which is already such a happy card, right? But there's something about the way that this water is flowing, and you can see the splash here with lots of movement. It brings an intense smile on my face. I like the colors too because they are so rich and vibrant. They tend to do well in like summer months for me when it's really hot and I need something that reflects just the vibrancy of what's around me. But it does really well in autumn too. Like, look at this card. So the Greenwitch, I just told my husband that it was number 5 and he's like, why? It's basically like an RWS clone. And I'm like, no, it's not. I was like, you don't know anything. Because if you look at this with death, I mean, come on here. Like, this man is teaching his son how to gather from the well, and then there's death that's waiting right behind him. This is so bittersweet. This is the saddest death card I think I have in my entire collection. But it's sweet. And we have this little egret here. I could gush about this one. Greenwitch, definitely number 5. All right, now we're getting to the part of the collection where I think if you've been around on my channel long enough, these are going to be no surprise at all. So we're going to go ahead and say number 4 is my Aztec Tarot. I know I show it in every video, guys. Like, this is my summer love. We're having a summer love, okay? And so I can't exactly express why I love this deck. Like, I've tried. Like, it reminds me of my favorite flower, which is the blanket flower. I've talked about that in past videos. I've talked about the way that it's more interesting art style, but yet like the simple palette gives me comfort during summer, right? Because it acknowledges kind of the chaos that's going around, but also gives me some breathing room since it is an RWS. But I think part of what makes this such a good reader, like a good deck for me, is how good of a reader it is. So there have been an amount of times where I've sat down to do a reading and the card that I pulled from this just completely took my breath away, right? There are decks that we have in our collection that make us believe in tarot. Not just like, okay, tarot works, but like makes us believe on a fundamental level that tarot works. And I can't describe the magic other than saying this deck is an uncanny reader. I don't know, I can't even talk about it. Like, it's pretty ineffable for me. So Aztec Tarot is number 4. This is not one that I expected to be this high up on the list. When I got this deck in, I liked it, but it was really just something I was interested in. But then I started using it, and it really does deserve to be that high up. So Aztec Tarot number 4. All right, next we have Serpent Peacock, the first edition. This is going to be number 3 on my list. This deck has been fighting and screaming to stay high up on my list all summer. Aztec Tarot almost nudged it out, but I think that the readings that I get with Serpent and Peacock are so damn sophisticated that it deserves to be at the very top. There are times when I sit down to do a tarot reading with this deck and I walk away with an understanding that is, I guess, unlike anything else that I get from any of my other decks. I'll ask it a question, and then the answer that I receive is like, I don't know if it actually answers my question or if it just points me in another direction. It's not a straight shooter. It's one that's like quirky and weird, and like you can tell from the magician here, like, what is going on with this magician? Like, it's great. The person who made this deck is more of an astrologer than they are a tarot reader. And so I think that the astrology influenced the images that they picked quite a bit. Like you can tell from here with the temperance. And so it's like it's tarot, but it's not on the nose tarot. I don't know, it stimulates my brain in a very intellectual way. I always feel like after I've sat down to read this tarot, it's like I've had like a flirting session. I don't know, I guess it's like a weird thing to say. I'm especially weird today, but hopefully y'all can bear with me. It feels like flirting. Like, it's interesting enough to me, it's intriguing enough to me, and I keep wanting to go back for more, even though it doesn't really answer my questions. It's a lot of fun. So, Serpent and Peacock, if y'all can bear with me about my weird description, this one is going to be number 3. If you would have asked me last year, this would have been number 2. So let's see what kicked it out. All right, guys, so if you've been around, you can probably guess what it's going to be. And I really do think it's going to be my William Blake. All right, here we go. So I very like awkwardly describe Serpent and Peacock as a tease, right? Like, it stimulates my brain, but it doesn't like quite answer my questions, nor does it really commit to a relationship. This deck is in for the long haul. Like, we're having a relationship, we're having a commitment. We could get married to this deck. Oh yeah, I know that's like super weird to say, but it's just the honest to God truth. So the reason that I am so entranced by this deck is because of the way that I can read this incredibly intuitively, because the artwork is just like a slightly bit off from traditional meanings. But then the guidebook has a section that directly tells us about how to read for the creative process. So it's interesting, right? Because I can sit down and read in an intuitive way, but then I can also use the guidebook to look for creative guidance in a very tangible way. So he intrigues me, but he also gives me tangible things. So that's why I say this deck would be more marriage material than Serpent and Peacock. I know this is a deck that people struggle with because of the way the borders are depicted. The creators switched aside the suits for some reason that I don't fully understand, but I just get used to them. Even though it has water on the border, this is actually pentacles. So, you know, it's different. Even though this has like this kind of earthy element to the side, poetry is actually wands. And then we'll see right here, the fire right here, this is actually water. So it's a little weird. It kind of takes some getting used to, and it takes some kind of mental agility. But I think that's part of the fun with reading of this, is that you can't just go to this when you're tired. You kind of have to really commit to it. And I like that level of commitment in my decks. You can blame it on my Virgo rising. I don't know, but it's a marriage deck for me. Y'all are really putting up with some weird stuff coming out of my mouth today. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'll rock with it. All right, so if William Blake is my deck husband, I don't know how my real husband's gonna feel about that, but he likes that deck too, so I guess that's good. I have to show you my grandmother, and that is going to be Terra Botanical. So many of you already know that this was the first deck that I ever bought and ever purchased. So this is always going to be number 1 on my list. I'm basically going to be like Racine from Owl Moon. You know how like Tarot of Vampires is always her thing. Terra Botanical is always going to be mine. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with if I get to the number 1 spot and people just click over because they've seen this deck so many times on my channel. So Terra Botanical is my grandmother. There is something steady and consistent about her because there's black and white imagery. It pulls on like an ancestral lineage for me. I feel like I go to her and there's a depth to her, especially with like images like this that are really, really high contrasted. And I feel like she listens. There's something about the black and white that holds space for me, to where I can come in with any problems that I have, any situation that I'm going through. And she's not loud and vibrant like William Blake. Like William Blake wants to talk to me, right? Like he's that partner that wants to chit chat. Terra Botanical is the one that says, let me make you a cup of tea and we can sit down and maybe pull some cards and walk through your problems systemically. So it offers support in a different capacity. This is a deck that just sets my brain on fire. When I read this deck, ooh, there's so many intuitive images that come to mind. So this is 6 of Pentacles, right? And you can tell that all of these nuts still have a shell around them. So when I pull this card, I think to myself, okay, if we are going to give to others, right? Because the Six of Pentacles is oftentimes about giving resources to others. We have to be in a stable position and make sure that all of our assets are well taken care of and well secure before we just hand them away, right? There's something about it. I mean, I know that they're not the most decorative pips, but I have such a deep relationship with them that with the Four of Cups here and these two cups here, it's almost like these are two people that are hanging back. They don't want to hang out with these two people up here having a party. These guys wants to stay at home and kind of withdraw. And I feel that in my gut. And hopefully that's something that comes across in my videos, that this deck, if I had to save some things from a fire, hopefully my husband would be responsible and, I don't know, like save our birth certificates or something, because I'm going straight for the pets and my deck. I really appreciate y'all being here and giving me this space to gush about my top 10. You can probably hear a lot of love in my voice as I'm going through these. So I hope that all of you have a beautiful day, and I'm going to go ahead and tag Mystic Rob's video down below because he recently did a top 10 video that I really appreciated. So if you're in the mood for more of this, go check out his. It was very enjoyable to watch. So I hope all of you have a beautiful day, and thank y'all so much for supporting my channel.